Welcome to the Irish Pagan School podcast. Your hosts are authors and co-founders of the Irish Pagan School here in County Waterford, Ireland, Lora O'Brien and Jon O'Sullivan. Fáilte.
Who is Danu? Well, Daidí agus Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. Jon O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School. And this is a question that is a little bit more complex than you might think, because when people think of Danu in a more modern context, they have this idea that she is this Irish mother goddess, this deity equated to the land itself, that from which all their gods spring forth. Now, a number of more modern individuals have created or have constructed an Irish creation myth where Danu pretty much falls into the role that you would find in Greek mythology of Gaia, as in this earth mother goddess individual. But when we go back to the root lore and the root sources, Ireland doesn't have a creation myth. We have the oldest records and the oldest stories we have is known as the Book of Invasions, the Lora O'Brien, the Book of Taking of Ireland, which talks about Ireland just existing in the world. And it's less about the creation of the world and the landscape. It's more about the peoples coming in and then naming and defining the landscape as they come into it and grow within it. And in the case of some tribes like the Caesarians, the Partholonians, and the Midians, die within it. So Danu is only seen in the genitive form of her name, and that's where we have a breakdown of a word which is used not as a noun, but as a declarative statement. And so where we find that quite commonly is, of course, in the Tuatha Dé Danann. So the Tuatha Dé Danann is the tribe of the goddess Danu, and that's pretty much what we have. Now, the Danann aspect, Danann is this genitive or this broken down or this shifted language form of Danu. Now, when we go outside of Ireland, there's a lot more references to Danu, but to keep it within the wheelhouse of Irish lore and Irish mythology, that's kind of the extent of it. Now, there is another individual in Irish mythology and lore known as Anu. Now, Anu is sometimes conflated with Danu in that they are similarly named and the wording seems very similar. In fact, there is still today on this landscape the Dáchich the Danann and Dáchich Nanan, which is the two peaks of Anu, which are a pair of rounded mountains in Ireland known as the Paps of Anu, which is, a reference to Anna's boobs. And so the name of the landscape, the structure of the land itself still bears the names of these ancient characters and individuals. Anu is said to be one of the daughters of Ernmas, much like the Baive and Macha, and Ernmas being this she farmer. So Anu falls very clearly, and we can point to Anu. We can see Anu's presence during the battles of Moytura. We have this continuing form of Anu, but where people take the Danu and then put that on top of Anu, it's making those leaps that sometimes can lead to realization or epiphanies, but also can lead to misinformation and confusion. So just because two things may sound the same or be spelled similar doesn't mean they are the same. And just because you have the word Danu in Irish mythology doesn't mean that that's the Danu from Balinese Hinduism or the Danu from other Indo-European circumstances. It doesn't mean it's not, but it doesn't mean it is. And so that's where we need to be very cautious when we approach this kind of exploration around gods, goddesses, etc. Now, we do have one reference to Danu specifically as mother of the gods, and that we find in Lora O'Brien. It's the Book of Invasions, and it is talking about, it's during the section about the Tuatha Dé Danann coming into Ireland. And from the information and the lore of the story that we know, the Firbolg are the incumbent tribe, the Tuatha Dé Danann come in, and there's a conflict at the first battle of Moytura, on the plains of Moytura, where the ascendancy and the dominion of Ireland is kind of decided by battle. And in a version of the poetic structure, again, there's the telling of the tales, there's also another translation of the tales, there's multiple translations of these stories, but there is one translation of the poetic structure of the stories, and it lists out a section that I'll read for you just here. It's going through talking about the different gods and goddesses and their roles and their places within the battle. And so it says, Eru, though it should reach a road's end, Bamba, Fodla, and Faye, Nevin of ingenious versicles, as in versifying, as in the poetry. And then it goes to Danann, mother of the gods. And so in this paragraph, we have the listing of what these goddesses are doing. Of course, Banva, Fodla, and Eru being sovereignty goddesses of Ireland. The fact that we have Danann listed amongst them and this mother of the gods specifically put in. That's where a lot of people are taking that she is the mother of all of the Tuatha Dé Danann. They come from her singular line of creation, or that she is this Gaia aspect of root creation. Now, even there, though, it's not given as Danu, it's given as Danann, which is that genitive form. So is it this mother of the gods individual, or is it this recognition of a collective mother of the gods? This is where we have difficulty looking into these prose forms and these structures of this very old Irish form of transferring knowledge by giving performative statements or performative poetry readings, which is kind of what this one is. As in the versicles, ingenious versicles. So if you want to know someone who's really good at, like, spitting rhymes, it's in fact Nevin, of all of the created goddesses of Ireland. Now, again, I'm not dumping on Bridget, who is a goddess of poetry, the Morrigan itself, goddess of poetry, and a lot of the structure of this first battle of Moytura, the goddesses are almost forming the boundaries, and their vicissitudes, their kind of truth saying, and their speaking to power, and their poetry is what actually defines the structure of the battle itself. It said that they raise up pillars upon which they stand, and then they recite the poetry which helps define not just the area of the battle, but then what is actually happening within that. And so at the end of battle, there is this recitation and this acknowledgement of the end of the battle, which is kind of the t-shirt I'm wearing today, which says it's not over till a goddess of battle and poetry performs a song about it or performs a poem about it. Um, Inspired by exactly this element of Irish mythology, that the goddesses would see what is actually happening and then they would recite what has happened, and in the Morrigan's case, what will happen with her prophetic poetry. But to pull it back to Danu, yeah, we can't say 100% for sure that there is a creation mother earth goddess known as Danu in Ireland. The only records that we have is this genitive form, as in the tribe of Danu, the people of Danu, and that's where people and the curious, of course, would look outside of Ireland for the information, because we know that the Tuatha Dé Danann came into Ireland after traveling around from their four great cities. And so people look at the river over in, I think it's Germany, which called the Danube, which has similar linguistic roots in its origins. If you go further afield, again, as I mentioned, there's a goddess. I'm going to pronounce this oddly, I'm sure. I took notes. Dewi Danu is a Balinese Hindu water goddess. There's Danu, who is Asura and Hindu primordial goddess of primeval waters, is another Danu. And then there's also the Proto-Indo-European religions, which talk about a water goddess known as Danu, all of which, again, makes sense, linking to the Danube River being a primordial source of water. Now, does this mean that the Tuatha Dé Danann specifically came from the river valley of the Danube? How can we say for sure? The linguistic roots of Proto-Irish have less in common with Indo-European root structures than they do with Finnish root structures, as linguistics are exploring that information now. But we need to be cautious of pushing the narrative so far back that we're just glossing it all into the one thing, that, humanity, of course, Homo sapiens, evolved in a singular location and then spread all over the world. If we just treat everything as the same, then we're missing out on the uniqueness of expression that comes from cultural diversity, which makes us an amazing species, in my opinion. So it's worth acknowledging that regardless of tracing it back to wherever it came from, within the concept of Ireland and the construct of Ireland's mythology, we don't specifically have a goddess who is worshipped on the land as a mother land deity known as Danu. We do have other goddesses, as I said, Anu, with, literally names on the mountains still in Ireland, but we can't say that they are the same thing. And it is as I said, it's a very complex kind of thing to explore. But it's worth exploring. And that is what we do here at the Irish Pagan School. We try and break down the information, ask the questions about what are the resources, good, bad resources, and then try and divine it back and say, okay, well, what can we point to? What can we actually say for 100% sure? And then explore that from a spiritual point of view. Like, learn the information, get the lore on board, and then approach that experientially from an informed point of view. My partner Laura and I do a lot of journeying and traveling all around the island of Ireland, exploring our spirituality within the landscape itself. And from Laura's experience, Laura has never interacted with a specific earth-based deity, goddess, Danu, in Ireland. Has connected with Anu, absolutely. We've been to the Gach Anan and the two peaks of the Paps of Anu. But yeah, I suppose it is about learning the information and then from there finding your experiences and then delving deeper and integrating your spirituality within your practices. So, if you would like to know more, check out irishpaganschool.com. We have a lot of actual in-depth, detailed classes there. If you want to dive in and grab something for free, irishpagan.school/free, over a year's worth of resources, more videos you can follow along here and enjoy. And as ever, take the information, be curious, follow your inspirations, and do the work. Until next time, look after yourself, take care, agus slán. Goodbye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a positive review in your podcast listener. Then head over to irishpaganschool.com and enroll in one of our free or paid courses. Slán go fóill, and we will see you next time.